Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I actually kind of want to continue the conversation. I made a video, which was a couple days ago, will probably be like a little over a week or maybe exactly a week ago, depending on when this video actually goes up, where I talked about the successors, the spiritual successors to Wild Arms and Shadow Hearts, that being Fantasia and Penny Blood. Well, the fact of the matter is, I feel like I spent a lot of that video talking about Shadow Hearts just because I talked about, like, I forgot how much I like the Wild Arms franchise, but like Shadow Hearts has always been in my head just because I've seen someone play it, like probably like a year or two ago. I was watching someone play through the Shadow Hearts games on YouTube, so that's what kind of kept that a little more in my head. But I kind of completely forgot how much I really liked the Wild Arms series because I hadn't heard about anything for so long, but I had it more in my head about how much I wanted a new Shadow Hearts. I've wanted one for a very, very long time. So, but I feel like I talked more about Shadow Hearts and gushed about that. I just want to kind of take a video kind of gushing about Wild Arms a little bit because there's a lot more about the Fantasia situation that I didn't really take time to really go over a little bit, because I talked a little bit about my experience with the franchise, how I played, with the exception of one, I've played most of the numbered entries into the franchise. Once again, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 2 I only played a little bit of. 3 I played a good, I probably didn't make it that far. I'll probably say like maybe a third of the way through, probably a little more either way, but definitely I played and beaten 4 and 5. So that's just, you know, recapping my experience once again in case you weren't aware. But having watched the trailer again, there's certain things I kind of forget about the Wild Arms franchise that I'm like, oh yeah, like there's other things you can kind of compare it to. I'm like, oh yeah, it definitely has like that Trigun feel to it. If you've ever seen the anime Trigun, I mean, I would assume the manga to some extent. I don't know like how that anime to manga to anime translation, like how much that differed, but it definitely has like that Trigun, because I feel like Trigun doesn't really lean into the science fiction of things until like when you really get into like Vash and Knive's story, but maybe that's just because I haven't seen it in so long. But I feel like I mean, it always depends, because I guess it depends on the games, but some lean more into like some fantasy elements while others kind of lean more science fictional. I want to say like 5 definitely lean more science fictional, because I forgot, like, wasn't that whole deal God, because I mean there was like a social commentary thing in like 5, because like there's like a hierarchy societal group where they like the Varuni. I don't remember, it's been so long. I want to say 4 definitely leaned into like the science fiction of it all too. I mean, like I said, it's definitely got that Trigun feel where you do have that Western, like, meets sci-fi, but I feel like some leaned more into, like, fantasy than others did. I think they all kind of have a blend of it, but I feel like they probably, I want to say, like, 3 definitely did, because I know they were, like, there's, like, the mediums angle to it, which are basically, like, the summons, which I think those are in all of them, but I think they're in all of them. Maybe. I know they were a really big thing in 3, but I can't remember. I should also talk about it too. I think it's interesting because it seems with Fantasia, they are bringing back the more probably open world element. I'm curious like how open world it is in comparison to the others, because the others were fairly open worldish with the exception of 4, if I remember correctly, because 4 was very much like, oh, you go from point A to point B on the map. It's that like, oh, like you travel to this point on the map and you explore the area, if I remember correctly. Whereas like probably like at least 2 and 3 to my recollection, I think maybe 1 as well, to the little I know about 1, are very much like, it's like your classic Final Fantasies like 7, 8, and 9 type of situation, or even the older ones where it's like, hey, there's a world map and you're going on it, going from place to place. 5 was like that too, but I feel like things were on a much smaller scale in comparison to like its predecessors. And something else I was also thinking about too when it came to the Wild Arms thing, because once again I forget a lot of interesting things about Wild Arms, is at least I want to say 1, 2, and 3 did a really interesting thing, which I thought was kind of interesting storytelling wise, is that your prologue is basically you playing each of your protagonists one story at a time. So like using 4 for example, I only remember some of the names. I want to say it's Jet, Clive, Virginia, was it Gallows? Was that like the 4th dude? I want to say that might have been his name. Like I know like that game's prologue, it's all 4 of them, like it's a standoff, all 4 of them pointing their guns at each other, and then like the game pauses and you basically pick everyone's story. I feel like the turnaround for that one is a lot quicker than some of the others to my recollection. I don't remember like 1 and 2 like how quickly like the groups get together. It might be pretty quickly, but I feel like 3 might have had the fastest turnaround because you were all together and that's how you all met, was that moment. And then like the chapters, like, oh, after the prologue's completely done, you kind of basically stick together, right? My thing was, I'm curious about Arm Fantasia. From what we saw in the trailer, there's only 3 protagonists. There could always be more, but to be fair, most, not all, but a lot of the Wild Arms tend to lean more towards like a smaller group. I want to say like 3, I mean, at least in the first game, it's only 3 characters most of the game, I think. Because I know there's a more like a later what was it Code F or something like that. There was like a remake of the first Wild Arms, and I think there's like 1 or 2 other characters you can play, but it's initially like your 3 protagonists, and I want to say there's more than 3 protagonists in 2. Once again, I just don't remember it as well because I only played a little bit of it, but 3 I'm fairly certain it's just your 4 all the way through. I know in 4 it's definitely only 4 characters. There's 1 character who's kind of a guest character you get to play with like maybe once or twice throughout the game, and then 5 you have your 6 main protagonists. Because when I was playing Final Fantasy 13, it never crossed my mind until now, the correlation of 13's kind of designed in that way where it's like, hey, you start, I mean, to be fair, like 13 like branches out even more because like your characters stay split up for like, what, 70% of the game, and then they all completely come together. My point was like the beginning of that game, you're kind of like bouncing between different groups, and once again, but that difference is that continues out through most of the game. Whereas Wild Arms, that's typically maybe kind of dealt with pretty early on, like I said, with maybe the exception of 5, where it's like you slowly pick up characters to join your party over the course of the game until you get like a maximum of 6 people. So I'm curious to see if this game does that, where like the opening will be that like, oh, different, because I think that'd be an interesting take, like I said, because I know that 4 and 5 didn't do that, so it'd be interesting if this game kind of brought back kind of something that is just allocated to like the older Wild Arms games in that regard, like I said, 1, 2, and 3. So it'd be interesting to know if they would do that or not. This is actually a conversation I had in the video that I actually kind of cut out just because I felt like I was probably dragging in a little too much, but I probably should have kept it in. I am curious about the gun situation, the armed element of it, because obviously it varies from game to game. Like, guns are like, you know, the arms element of it all, the gun element is... Sometimes the games lean into it being a very special thing, and some games make it somewhat special, but not like crazy special. Like in 4, the main protagonist Jude using a gun. It's a very specialized gun because it's actually kind of a gun sword. Because if I remember correctly, it can work like a gun, but also like a sword. I want to say, I know Dean's weapons kind of work like that in 5. Or was it the Twin Feariners? But going back to Jude, he's the only person in your party that actually uses a gun. Everyone else in the party uses different weapons. So him using a gun is very special, and because in that universe, arms are seen as something very dangerous because they're old, you know, old technology, kind of like resurfaces stuff that the world doesn't know too much about. Because I feel like in 2 and 3 they make a point of like, oh, like you using guns and stuff like that is very like, oh, like it's kind of like, it's kind of a thing that you take notice of, but it's not as special as it is in 4. Like 4, they make a whole point about it. 5 to some extent, like, but it's almost like using arms is kind of like part of heritage. Like I know like Dean wasn't old enough to technically use any yet, I don't think, or he hadn't like proven himself to like be able to use arms yet, but Rebecca had been used, for example. So like, to be fair, kind of in the Jude camp, Dean does use a very special pair of twin, like, I don't even know you call them pistols. They're very uniquely designed, especially with like, almost like the clips to the gun are used as like steel swords blades. It's a whole thing if you've never played Wild Arms 5. So, but looking at the main characters in this, I think it's interesting that the other two, one has a sword and the other one kind of has almost like a staff, like, so they're probably like more magic based, maybe. I am curious to see, are we going to get something more 4-ish or 5, especially with the reload system, because that's a big part of those games, that they do have that realism of, yeah, because you are using guns, you will need to reload. So I'm curious if in this particular game will they use that mechanic. Because it's an interesting thing, because I know in 5, even your characters who didn't use guns, like Avril, for example, I know, like, I mean, I want to say, like, Chuck was the same way, too. That his weaponness is, like, because I know it, like, it has a gun to it, but it also has, like, a spike to it that he uses almost like a jabbing weapon. But, like, everyone else, I actually remember a lot more characters' names for that, because it's, like, the other character is Carol and Greg. I'm like, wow, I remember everyone's name. It's been years. I just think that's so interesting. putting tangents and all that aside, like Avril, for example, she uses a sword, but they kind of make it because everyone pretty much uses a gun to some extent. Once again, I think Chuck's a weird example, but I don't remember. I think his was a grenade launcher. I think Carol's was like hers is a backpack that like shoots rockets. I think that's how that works. So, but I think Chuck can also use his because even when you don't use it like a gun, it still gets used. It's like, oh, every time you attack, it still used like ammunition. Like Dean only uses his guns as actual guns when he's doing critical damage, because he'll double critical damage with his weapons. That's how they work. So that's the only time in battle he'll ever use them like fully as a gun. That's a whole thing in itself, right? So I'm curious, are they going to bring back that reload system, especially considering only one of your protagonists actually uses a gun? Because I know they kind of kept that the same in 4, making it so no one else had to reload because no one else but Jude used a gun. Everyone else had a regular like other weapon, like whether it's like, I want to say it's Raquel, she had like a giant like kind of almost heavy blade. Another character, I forgot what his weapons were. I know the other kid, what's her name, was it Yuli or something like that? I know she had like these, they're almost like chakras, like those bladed ring weapons. I'm going on a huge tangent, but like I said, that's kind of the whole point. I wanted to make a video just kind of like basking in like the wild armness of it all. But once again, my point leading on all of this too is like what we saw in the trailer though. It did seem like it is kind of his gun, in fact, actually kind of reminded me of, if you've ever seen Outlaw Star, Gene's caster gun, with just the nature of it. It does seem like it fires regular bullets, but like it feels like they making a point of it being like, oh, you can fire the supercharged thing. It might be just the Japanese RPG, the JRPG anime magic of it all, but it might just be like, no, it actually might use specialized bullets or something like that, or like it can charge magical energy or something like that. Once again, using an example of, I mean, it's not a one-to-one, but easy example would be like the caster gun, which once again I think Jude's weapon from Wild Arms 4 kind of worked very similarly. Like I said, once again, I feel like I just wanted to make this video to kind of even kilter it a little bit. I've already done like 2 videos talking about Shadow Hearts prior, so I just wanted to kind of even the playing field a little bit and kind of talk about Wild Arms a little bit, because like I said, it made me realize like, man, I really do like the Wild Arms franchise. I just forget just because I've not played the last one I played was Wild Arms 5, and I haven't played it in so long. I don't remember how long. That was a PS2 game. But you know, tangents and all that aside, I obviously like I said, I kind of made this kind of a continuation of the ARM Fantasia conversation, but also talk about the Wild Arms games. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Like, let me know your experience with the Wild Arms franchise. Have you played all the games? Have you played some of them? What are your thoughts about ARM Fantasia? Applying some of my thoughts about, you know, some of the previous Wild Arms. What do you think, just from the short trailer we got, like what do you think we could see applicable to this spiritual successor? What will they keep? What will they change, you know, from like its spiritual predecessors to some extent? But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good